Okay, so we're starting with the prop train. So the prop train is 1 or 2 blankets at the back, the bolster, and then I'm going to sit on a block next to the bolster in front, per se. And then as I have my block out to the foot of the mat, this will help you get a little more inversion. So the feet could be down on the ground. You'll probably find that we do that most often because it's easier to move the props around. But let's work on getting in the poses versus if the props are in a perfect place to have the sequence look different. So let's get our prop set so that when we recline back, we feel our pelvis on the block. And then as you lower, have your sand very close. Have your belt around your thighs so it's at the top. So feel if you can get that belt so it's not around your buttocks, but it's just very close. So you might notice it right at the base of your buttocks, and then grip up the belt so it's secure, and then kind of kick forward to that block. I kind of luck out. I almost have a wall for my feet, which is excellent if I could do that, but I didn't think about it before. So it's there, but as you put the feet up, and then you get your sand across either the thighs or the rib cage, then you lower down your head on 1 to 2 blankets. Now the blankets are completely supporting the situation. So if you have 2, you're going to feel like the whole front layer of your torso is elongating that core. The core viscera is what it would be typically described as. So if I move the shoulders back, see if you can spend the first few moments here articulating shoulder speak, right? So feeling if your shoulders, how they move, if your arms go towards each other, how they motion when your arms separate, and then that use of the props, all of them, and scanning how each prop is supporting your elevation, kind of your levitating experience of getting into this pose. Be sure that your arms can be in a symmetrical experience. And then as the chest opens and the ribs spread, feeling the motion of your respiratory muscles in operation. So exploring, breathing, and the deeper sensations that are coming into your consciousness because of the shape and the direct intensity of this bridge pose. On your breathing tracks, on your organs, right, since they are not in their downward stagnant kind of drop, right? They're not in prolapse, they're somewhere in between. So fulfill the breath and experience quality of breathing. Let's take a few moments to be inquiring just that you want to find a settling experience for your breathing, kind of a welcoming inwards. And if there's areas that don't feel quite supported, this would be the time to change your propping. Maybe you need more support. Maybe your legs don't want to be straight, right? You can always bend your knees, move the sand off, and place your feet on the floor and still work with bridge pose. Try to let the thighs grip up a little bit, almost as if you're contracting the musculature above the kneecaps, and feel if that tends to change the balance in the hips. And then I encourage you to let that go. So that's the scanning awareness, feeling, sensing, and then releasing. And then we strengthen the long base for a few more moments. And feel your shoulder blades try to cling back in towards your blanket and your bolster, though. The bolster should really be the bulk of the experience with the bottom tip of the shoulder blades, the spine. So much of the spine is guarded by the bolster, but it's those lower tips of the blades, opening the chest. It's a fairly unusual sensation to be this vulnerable with the rib cage. You know, if you have sandbag one, right? If you have one, put that one sandbag up to the ribs. If you need a kind of a reset right now, we're going to unbuckle or kind of slide that belt off. And as you bring your feet down so that the knees pop up, right? So you have your knees bending, feet down, and then move into cobbler's pose. So the soles of the feet together, the knees separating. And when you sense the legs trying to move apart, can you find the balance of the feet in connection, which might be close to the groins, it might be farther downstream, and finding where that circulation is in the inner thigh. So clear that it's an inner thigh circulation. And if I try to let the knees descend, like with an energy of pressure, it won't be very useful for my nervous system. So feel if you can, maybe you have to flutter the legs. That's why this is often times called butterfly. Maybe you flutter the knees up and down, but at some point you want to find a still point to honor the circulation that this pose brings to the lymph, right, in the groins, and also the circulation into your ribs with your sand up just below the sternum. Even if you have a pretty light bag, even if it's 5 pounds, it's still going to bring your attention to the breath, directing at the ribs. So belly softens. It now can start to feel from that straight line of the bridge into a little bit more of an open shape with the stomach. Now the arms could stay open, generous for the chest, or you could work with reaching them both behind you, either separately or intertwined at the fingers, and then pressing the palms back. The most important part right here is that your brain is in a relaxed place, so the neck is comfortable. So let's say that your blanket was going okay, but now it's starting to feel like you need more. You can always use your second blanket, roll it up under your head, or see if your neck can adjust and gently stretch open in the front. So about 5 more seconds here. So it'll be real brief before we shift into the side layers. And now release that grip with the fingers. And then as you separate the elbows open, motion the knees to point up and walk the feet closest towards your seat. Shift the sand to the left. Okay, so we're free of the belt, but when we roll over a little bit off of the block under your tush, I want you to be a little sensitive to your back muscles. So once you shift your block, bring it overhead and then let the ribs do the rotation. So one thing you might play with is to keep your seat off of the floor as much as you can, so you feel your feet push down. So there's an energetic grip in the thigh muscles. And then it's like you're trying to wag your tail a little bit. So you're going to shift your hips towards the right. So you're moving from the pelvis to the rib cage to roll to the left. And then as you go over to that left side, start to adjust, and let's stretch our right quadricep. So some of us will have 2 blankets. And now this is a good time for you to get all of your blankets, unless you got a big stack with you, but at least 2. And you'll place the second one up. So now we have our ribs on that left side over the bolster, and we're going to reach to the right ankle. and hold onto that ankle to stretch through the quad. I like to hold my head in my left hand for this one, but I want you to notice that for some of us, this might not be accessible with the hold of the ankle, but you still might want to get that quad stretch. So you can get a belt and place that to your foot. You might need to bring your knee in, get the belt around your foot, and then reach so that it's maybe a little less stress on your knee joint for some of us. If the belt works better, but you can still get your foot, you can try that. It might feel disconnected if you can already get your foot by using the belt. So we're working on moving the knee back in line versus trying to pull it up or push it down. So when I hold on to my right foot, you can always lower down into your left arm too. This is not essential to keep your head lifted. It would probably be better if you could, right? So it's easier on the neck. But you're trying to get that right thigh directionally to reach back. Should feel like a pretty good tug in your quad, the front, that hip flexor and the right leg. It is a hip flexor. Okay, so sensing the body, getting into the practice, centering continuously. Now we're going to move our foot to the floor, and I'm going to shift up so I can put that block, or you could use a ball, on the inside of the right leg and push it back so that I can open up to the front of the hip. Okay, now we'll take side sage. You can use the blankets like this so they're lengthening spine-wise back from the bolster. You can also shift the blanket so they're horizontally across the mat, and then work with that block overhead, sand on the ribs. Okay, and as the sand, well, actually that's not my ribs as much as my hip, but if I put my sand up like so, if it's across from my ribs down to my kind of that connection to my thigh bone, it feels a little different than what I've been exploring up to now. So we've had the sandbag across, and if you're using one, you want to change its connection to your breathing muscles. And as you reach over, whether you use a block or maybe you like to touch the floor, or maybe you can touch the floor with your arm spaciousness in the armpit. But the armpit chest spaciousness is really a topic often in study groups for this, for the style that I like to study often. And the armpit chest, right, we're working with that awareness of the shoulder joint, the chest muscles, and the breathing muscles. So if you get fatigued with this reach overhead, or if it just, sometimes it triggers things in your trapezius, sometimes it doesn't work for us. So if it's triggering something, then I would recommend that you relax that reach and maybe soften the elbow. Just notice those little things that feel positive or not so helpful, and change according to your body's mood. Yeah, so the arm could also open and keep movement going is another option. Movement cycles. So either gently circling the arm or trying to spread the armpit chest back through the arm itself, or letting the hand lower down and rest on the blankets. Okay, now I know some of us might use the blanket so they're lengthwise, so it'll be a little different for you, but you still want to be supported underneath your head. So with the costal breathing, the intercostals expand in the side body. Feel if you can let your weight of your head relax into the blankets. It seems to be a final instruction, is what is going on with your neck. Yeah, if something's a little uncomfortable in your neck, or you're noticing things coming up in your shoulder, see if you can be sensitive to where that's coming from. And slow down and breathe and make a little bit of shift so that it's releasing. Sometimes the subtle is the most therapeutic for arms and shoulders. So sometimes that deep reach can be aggravating. So you might just find where it's somewhere in between or it's fluid and moving. Okay, so as that right leg is either reaching back or you're going to try to reach it back a little bit, you can keep it on a ball or block or see what it feels like to stretch it back. Sensitive to the knee. Okay, now in the final few moments, I want you to work with that opposing reach of the right side. It doesn't have to be the arm overhead, but the right side. It could be ribs, breathing deeply, and the right leg. So ideally it would be arm would be reaching and leg would be equally reaching in the opposite direction, right? But it's an arched body, right? So you have a little bit more of a curve to this shape. Or if your arm is fatigued, you're still working with the reach of the ribs with the right leg back. And the foot is on the floor still. So we'll start to shift our sand off and we'll turn to, what I'd like you to try is to go anywhere between awareness in the arms, but when you push back and energize into the core. So when I turn to the bolster, so I face down, and if that block is, actually, you can probably kind of keep it back there. Let's keep it back there. Turn, so where most of us are probably facing kind of away at this point. So when you have your hands onto floor space, when you lift up your knees and you feel where that block is behind you, maybe we're going to actually use it back there. But work with that reach of the hips and the motion of the chest. I know one side probably feels a little longer than the other because of the previous work we've been influencing those muscles. Now, bend your knees enough so that you can either kind of scoot your feet a little forward, then walk your hands back. And as you approach the feet with your upper body and arms lowering downwards, take a reach for that block. Okay, I know some of us this will be accessible and some it will be a little tricky, but you'll take the block so it's behind your heels. Okay, so my block is in, you know, it's got two different heights I could use for this, two different angles. It could be flat, and then I could pivot it so that this is kind of a different way of talking about a block than I have ever done. But, you know, if I reach back to that block, then I get a little more stretch if the block is flat. If I turn the block up on its, you know, most slender edge, then it's a little easier to clutch onto it. But you might find, well, that's accessible for some, but not maybe for you. So you could also have your block in front of you on top of your bolster and work here. So I want you to find the direction that is complementary to your feet being about hips distance, because if you're using a block, it can't be that much wider. And if you can bring the block behind you, let's say you have it on a flat and it's like a deeper stretch for your hamstrings, you're going to clutch back onto that block, however, you know, long your arms are, clutch back onto it, let your elbows open out and stretch out that back circulation. Let your head guide down as if the crown of your head is aiming towards the earth. So it's an inversion. And your sitting bones have direct ascension, keeping those elbows wide. If your block is forward on your bolster, still I want you to keep the elbows wide and try to straighten the legs for us today. Try to muscle up around the knees and feel that circulation in the hamstrings. A few more breaths. Okay, now as we start to shift back, then taking that block aside And let your back roll up. So you're gonna push into your feet and then carefully use your hands so they kind of stride on the body, just the coat of the body, and then roll up to standing. Reach both of your arms up. If your blood pressure feels real shifted, push into your heels, reach up through your arms, breathe, and then bend your knees and feel your tush push back. And as you come forward with your arms straight in front of you and you're starting to guide yourself carefully down to monitor that inversion, let your head bow down a little bit and then walk on forward and take a moment in a downward dog. If you need to skip dog pose, you can come down to hands and knees. That's fine. Okay, now those of us in dog pose, feel the reach of your heels to the floor. Good. So you have your sitting bones motioning back. And the arm circulation is deep. Right? It's important to have that arm hope, right? Hope that you can use your arms to hold you up and hold all your body weight, which is part of the strengthening. And as you move your body forward towards what seems like a push-up positioning, you'll walk your feet back and then lower your knees down and toes stay hooked under. So it takes a tiny bit of pressure off of my hands. It's not very much, but it's a small dose of pressure. So I try to stretch the bottom of my foot. And then as you round your back and bring your chin towards your chest, so you really scoop up and you create that chin drawing in, stretch your neck. Okay, now gently feel that arch of the spine, okay? And then we'll start to come into that side stage for the, actually not side stage yet, we're gonna do the quad stretch. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch my direction. You don't have to switch yours because you probably don't wanna move all your props around town, but switching my direction here for a moment so that you'll be on your right hip and we'll stretch into our quad. So I'm gonna have my right arm lengthening and my left hand holding my ankle. And I find that at first it worked pretty good for me to have my hand being held, but then it was a little much on my neck. So you will have to find out what works for your knee. And if it's feeling a little bit awkward for the knee, then you want to be a little careful here and then use a belt probably under your foot. You can do that. So I would bring my knee in towards my chest, get my belt, and you could wrap it. So it's mostly going to be at your foot if you're using a belt, and then reach back. Now, one nice thing about using the belt on this, on my foot, that's the difference than your ankle, is that I can move the leg quite a bit farther back than if I held it with my hand. So it does require some core strength to do that, you know, because you have to hold up the whole left leg. It seems like there's some muscling to get there, but you might find that you get some path, a little bit of a pathway into your thigh muscle. It's not meant to be a relaxing position. So if you're feeling like I'm not able to sleep in this position, that's you're doing it right. Some poses are sleepful. Yeah, the right knee has to drop close to the bolster so that you can put your weight into that right hip bone for weight bearing. Yeah, if it's a little bit grippy and you're holding with your hand, which is fine, try to move the knee back so you're stretching the front of the thigh. Okay, keep that continuous awareness through the joint, through the hip joint, the frontal bones of the hip, through the thigh. And then in a few moments, we'll do side stage, but I want you to go into that at your own pace. So if you like this one, you want to stay longer, even if it's intense, you can stay a little bit more with the shape. If you're feeling ready to keep moving through the patterns, you're going to probably use a block. I got props everywhere here. a block on the inside of the left leg, or a ball, whatever you happen to have that seems to be right for today. And then as I come into the side, I'm going to pivot my blankets. I like that, it's easier on my shoulder. And then as I bring the sand to my ribs. Yeah, so try to get that sand up fairly high so that the balance in your muscles is honestly supporting your breathing muscles. The one thing forgotten here is the block overhead. Or I could use the wall probably. So feel that the breathing muscles are trying to stretch as much as your body parts. And that might be the most interesting thing for you to explore with the practice. Is feeling where your head is comfortable, where your arm is willing to surrender into the shape, especially the upper arm finding a still point. And then as you're working your waist to this length, can you make sure that lower leg is really comfortable? So if your knee is kind of sliding down on the right leg, you really want to hook that up so it's next to the bolster. So there's nothing wrong with moving your props so that you are comfortable, not that they look right? So that's kind of the problem, I think, with some analysis is, well, maybe it doesn't feel exactly supportive. So you might change your bolster, pivot it a little bit so it's really conforming to your ribs. Because they don't look like a bolster, right? They have their fanning, they're like a fan. So weight of the sand on the ribs, breathing slow, expansive, and connected on the exhalation, right? So you find the end of the breath, and then you cycle into that next and empty the lungs. So each pose can be a bit of a meditation on breathing cycles, centering the brain. Now, do your hips move a little bit? Are they feeling supple enough to have opportunities to shift, or they feel kind of stiff? So we're trying to get long stretches here so that eventually it loosens up that stiffness that sometimes is experienced in your joints. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes. Now stay with the pattern for a few more moments. Keeping that side reach, that expansion through the ribs, that momentum with the inhale and the exhale. And now when you start to come up from this side reach with that right hip down, you're going to move your sand aside. You're going to slide it off. Bring the left knee towards the right. And then when you start to motion your body, kind of rousing it up, I want you to shift. And when you sit, you're going to use your bolster to prop up your spine. So kind of come to the practice sometimes with, hopefully I'm helpful with the kind of acknowledging where the parts are centering. But when you sit up on your bolster, we're going to take a cross-legged position with the right foot forward of the left. So you're up on that height. The blankets behind you, I would just leave them because they have a special order at some point, I'm sure. But when we take a seat here, we got our left leg crossed in. Notice how you center your ribs. Just kind of do an estimate about how lifted you can work with your rib cage, okay? Just stay with that for the time as you get your belt and working on that kind of that intra-abdominal pressure to help you lift up. Okay, so I'm going to take a belt. I want you to place your belt so that you buckle it up. You're going to make a really big loop because it's going to hold your whole leg length. So you likely just buckle it up, loosen it if that's necessary, bring it overhead and around your, it's going to be kind of upper rib cage for this one. But the key here that I'm trying to influence you a bit with is this lift, this inner kind of lifting pattern. I know that when you're lying on your bolster, it's easy to get that lift, but when you're sitting up, it's where we have the work to do. So we take our belt under our right foot and we move our belt up high, and then we kind of swing the leg out and see what happens when you have some kind of fun with it. This left leg is kind of it's definitely your anchor here. So you want to keep that in a bent position. You could play with the left leg moving a little bit open, pulling it in closer. You could put a sandbag on the left leg. That's kind of nice to do. The sandbag is probably going to help you if you use that. However, it's good to go kind of all directions with these patterns. So when I have my leg in front, what I want you to work with is not trying to get the leg as high as you can, like your full hamstring position, but how you're working this leg to help you move upright and sit tall. And so I'm using my extremity to help myself. During the day, it usually helps drop you forward because your feet are below you. But right now we're trying to work with it to lift up this rib chamber, okay? The center sack of our body, right? Trying to give it a little bit of oomph, okay? So if your shoulder blades can like kind of grip back into the belt, that would be great. If you've got back sensitivity, I would work with this kind of pose often and maybe not use the sand. Maybe that's too much intensity. But for those of you that are safe with that, go with it. Flex the foot so the belt is near the center of your foot. So you're working with that plantar fascia. You're working on mobilizing. And now as I move the right knee to point up, right, it just basically bends. I want you to shift your leg out to the right and then lower your belt down. And likely you have to loosen it up again. Okay, so I want you to be able to just stretch it though. So it's straight out to the right side. And again, you can have your sand on the left leg. That's an option. I'm just trying the sand free today on this one, see how it goes. But please put it on if you like. It just would be onto the thigh like so. That might be really rooting for some of us. It feels good. I'm gonna leave it for now. Okay, so tighten up the belt. Keep it so it's not so much around your buttocks now, but it's really in that lower, like if you were to pull the belt onto your belly like a belly belt, it would be just below the navel. Okay, so it's not on the legs, right, per se, it's on your foot. Now bring your block so you have one between hands up and bend your elbows so as the hands move the block wide back behind you. Your work here is on that lifting, but not trying to just force and jet your ribs. So spend a few moments here with that lengthening up the arm straight, holding the block, and then bending the elbows, the block goes back towards the upper back. Inhale, arms straight, breathing. Exhale, bending, elbows. Basically feel a roundedness, right, through the upper ribs. Okay, now last time when the arms go straight up, yeah, good. So you have that reach with the hands. The block might start to feel heavy a little bit at this point. Feel if you can lift up through the armpit chest. I know, that's a good breathing marker, right? The armpit chest lifting. Okay, and then we'll twist to the left. Okay, and we'll put the block down, maybe behind you on your blankets, unless you get really long arms, that won't work probably. But you'll bring your right hand to the left leg, either to the sand or the leg itself. And then as you turn to that left side, feel how the ribs have that automatic lift off, right, from the last shape. But let's just be here with it. So we turn and we feel that kind of robust, that rotation. It's actually a robust, right? It's rotating. So when you're turning, and the ribs might be kind of slanting back, that's typical. See if you can spend the energy on what would it be like if my ribs, they have expansiveness, but I'm working on lifting tall through my neck and up to my brainstem. Okay, now you've got to push into your foot, right? The belt is there for an actually security reason right now, for your hip guard. It's like you got a hip guard. Good. Okay, so when you come back center, forward, I think you could probably move your block out. What we'll do is we'll take our belt straight, we'll take our leg actually with our belt clearly holding onto the leg. And I want you to take the hands to hold it this time and feel if you can push through your leg, use your leg musculature to get it up, to pull it up. So you got to use both arms, probably 80% arms, right? Elbows by your sides, robot arms, and then the leg is up. Really flex that right foot, bend your knee, right knee, take the belt off, keep it around your waist so you have it for soon to be adventures. And then we're going to cross that right foot over the left knee so the sand can stay in place if you have that. And we'll take that twist to the right side now, but noticing it's a little more challenging to drop and round as when the leg was straight. With the knees bending, right, the legs are not straight, you can hook that left elbow to the right leg and come into that rotation. So massaging the organs, but also nourishing and hydrating the spine. So if it feels like a jab into your leg with your left arm, really work with either holding your leg for some of you that feel like it's too aggressive with the arm straight. And you either have your arm holding the leg or the hook of the elbow on the leg to twist to the right. And lift up through the heart center. Breathe. I know there's areas that get a little bit challenged that are trying to stay with the sensation of sitting tall. So the best that you can do. Okay, now when you come back through to center, feel the left knee out and then bring the right foot to connect to the left foot. So they're going to uncross and come into Baddha Konasana. Uncross asana to Baddha Konasana. Okay, and then put your sand on the tops of your feet, your knees out. You can put blocks under your knees. You can keep them like they are here. And then I want you to lean forward like you would any butterfly pose you remember where you hold your feet. Right now you have sand instead. And lean forward, but feel the articulation of the foot, right? The bones in the foot are turning open. And if it's awkward for you, then don't use your sand. You don't have to use that extra amount of circulation. But we're working with that continuous stretch of the inner thigh. So just play with that for a moment. Feel. That's all we do. Extrasensory people. ESP. Okay, now when you're leaning down, can you let your waist go like, it's almost like you want to imagine you are folding at the hinge of the hips and you're moving down versus crowding your stomach by rounding it back. So you are tilting at the hips and going forwards. Well, I'm assuming you experience that right now. Okay, now we're gonna stay with this awareness in the spine. So all we'll do is move our sand. If you're using it on your legs for these shapes, put it to the right thigh. Pull the right foot in closer towards the bolster. You got your belt, it's still there. So we'll place it over in front of us under our left foot. And now I bring the belt up high and I lift up the leg. So by now, if you've been doing classes off and on for quite a while on Zoom, You can tell that each week I have sort of some sort of a the centerpiece lineup, which is the kind of the math of the class, these parts, where we have to kind of brainstorm the work, but the basic work with all the belting and the coordination of our legs is also coordination of your breathing cycle, of your back musculature. So sometimes going through it is enough, right, versus analyzing it too much. I'll do the analysis of it if you want. But if that right knee doesn't touch down, you could put a ball or a block under it. If it's feeling like it's tight and it's bouncing up and your hip is tighter for when the knee is out and on something, you can place a block under the knee too. Okay, so know that you can use props often. So instead of pulling on the belt, which I could do, there's nothing wrong with that, I'm working with feeling it to the center of my left foot. And tilting a little forward is not out of line here, but I'm working more on how can I sit up, utilize my core sense, breathing. So this is a little more of this core. So let's say if you were to touch your core body and you notice your hips are pretty grounded, but maybe your front belly is not so balanced, right? So you want to use that push into the belt with your foot to activate the low back muscles and feel that combine around to the core. So it's like this kind of core set that you're working on here, strengthening. So it doesn't necessarily feel like your belly pulls in tightly, that's not the focus, but you are getting this kind of network of circulation in the center piece of the body. Now, as you bend through that left knee, you get the choice. When you move your belt down, you want to feel like it's not on your ribs when you stretch your left leg out, right? We don't want it up here. So I just lower it down and then loosen up the belt. And as I stretch the left leg open out to that left side now, I'm going to work with simply that direction of pushing out. Now, one thing I was plotting on this one was that, we do these side reaches with the belt. But I want you to emphasize this core strength today. A lot of this comes from our beginning pose, right? Our lengthening the front. But I would like you to come away with not a lot of wrenching in your back, but feeling like you have support. So when I get the block on this side, I'm going to take the block forward and push my left foot out. So it's about 10 or 11 o'clock on the left side. And then as I move my arms up, I'm going to stay with that steady thread of like I'm holding the block. Like instead of pushing on the sides, I'm holding the block. And it feels heavier. And as I add that lift, I want you to feel when you hold the sides of it and you bend your elbows. They don't have to be perfect in a position where your block is behind your head. But feel the bending of the elbows and then try to lift up from your armpit chest to get your elbows to flow up. Yeah, the block, heck, you might drop your block by accident for this one. But just simply working with that armpit chest lift. I know, as long as they don't get ticklish. Armpits. Okay. So we're going to turn to the right and we'll put our block behind us. Some of you might use the block for a little bit of extra support with your hands. Some it might be too high. And then lift up through the center line of the body so you'll feel your ribs go right. The left side of your belly is going to pull with the ribs to the right. Left hand on the right leg, somewhere, maybe the sand, maybe the knee, depends on your arm length. And then as you come into the spinal rotation, just notice our spinal twists today are very balanced in the midline, not wrenching in the side waist. So I want you to try to find that inner lift. Belly moves with the breath. Okay, keep the belly soft. It already has enough tone from these poses. Okay, now when you get a feel of coming back forwards, shifting, this time I want us to shift, and then when you come front, bring your right arm over left, and intertwine the arms, lift the elbow bones up. So this is a arm twist, right? Garudasana, eagle pose. So the arms are an eagle. Okay, now change the crossing. So left arm over right, hooking towards the elbows. You can almost give yourself a pat towards the sides of the shoulders and then intertwine the arms so they lift a little bit up. Not required they go very high, but the direction is up. All right, so I still have my left foot pushing into the belt. I try to keep my sitting bones very grounded here, centering, almost as if there's a little weight tilting forwards. And then as you remove that pressure with the arms, right, that intra pressure through the armpit, okay, bring them back and interlace your fingers and stretch back. Now, here's one where this works for some with the hands together, but I'm gonna have my palms open. And if it's a tough one for you, you might work with the hands touching the bolster and the shoulders back. Okay, so that's going to still, maybe for some even better opportunity. Or you could clutch on your blankets, right, and pull them in closer and then reach back to the blanket edge, which is nice. So find what's really realistic for the center. If I look like I'm tilting back and dropping back, my focus is to use that belt sensitivity to feel myself try to get upright. Okay, so now unlatch your hands or your blankets. And then when you start to slide that left foot in, we're gonna take the belt off of the foot for this one, and then move the block away if it's under that right knee. Now, get a feel when that left knee opens, right? So there's this kind of flush, right? Seated twists are definitely flushers. So when I bring my left leg up, pointing me up, I'm gonna cross it over the right and simply work with this motion of the ribs first and foremost to the front. Okay, and the sand for me is on my right thigh. That works really good. It might not be something you prefer. And then when you turn the waist to the left, okay, feel that you still have the center lift. And then when you hook that elbow to that left leg or you hold the leg, you want to reach back with that left hand and probably have enough of a reach onto a blanket. So you might have to push your props around, but you have something that you're supported on with your left hand, whether it's a blanket or a block on top. Depends on the length, but feel where this body twists. Notice where your twists occur. Are there like 4 segments of twists, or does it seem like just one perking twist? So resting your eyes and centering, whether you have eye contact with something or closing the eyes. Feel from the inside the deeper breath and the exhalation. That's when we want to take the twist, right, is on the exhale. So we feel the arm push and the rotation. Okay, now with all these kind of core rotations and binds, right? A lot of this is binding work, right? Because we're pushing, we're focusing on one lever against the next to get the movement. We're going to unwind. And then as you come back in through center, let's uncross the leg parts. And then keep your belt, you know, if you have your belt still buckled in a loop, kind of swing it around your body so you'll be using it a little while in the back. So let's keep it, let's just kind of keep it on ourselves if we can. It'll be interesting how we formulate that. But what we're going to do is lie on our back, but you're going to have your bolster under your pelvis, under your seat. And so a few classes, I've had us doing this with our blankets, both like this. Okay, so this is a little easier on the back. Okay, so you can lie back with your back on that blanket set. If you want to do the classic version we've done most of the time until recent, you can take a blanket aside and have one blanket under your head, so it's horizontal. So I'll show that one today, but know that you can use 2 blankets lengthwise under your spine And then you might have to modify as we go with shifting those, but I'll try to remember the cue for that when we get to a shift pose that you might have to move them. So keep the belt, so it's going to be around your upper back when you come onto your back. So I'm just going to flow it back and down. And I have a block pack, one on each side. And as you lower back, lift up the feet, lift up, swing the knees up. And then if that belt is under your pelvis, you want to slide it onto the upper back area. You'll know in a while where that's coming. It'll be a bit. And then take a block between the knees so it's narrow and open the arms. Move any props that just really aren't helping you out that are near the side. You might have to shift some things around. Stretch out the arms. You might be on a support of a blanket under your spine, but regardless, you feel the spine lengthening, right? It's gone from sitting up and holding all your balance. And bring the knees from side to side. If you can barely hold the block, you can use a ball, right? If you decide you'd rather have the ball between the knees. Blocks can be a little awkward, but they do create the spacing, right? Just like the ball does. So it's whatever you have. So when the knees swish from side to side, see if you can notice with really out sight, without your eyes looking at your movement, which could be a sense that you might want to eliminate on this pose so that you can really sense your lower back muscles into your pelvis. So when you move the knees side to side, can you stretch your waist when your knees go over? Okay, are you able to pin down your upper back and your shoulders so your waist is stretching? So maybe go a little slower, but still clutch that item between the knees because that's creating that tone in the pelvic floor. The feet could be cuddly, right? They could be pretty close together. And now when you come back in center, it should feel pretty nice in the back. Place a block now. The block is what you'll need under the right leg, and left leg stretches straight down. Hold that back of that leg with the flat block, so the flat side of that block wide, hands holding it, and make a little bit of impression in your leg, finding as high as you can get on the back of that right leg. So it might be closer to your upper hamstring, and that contour of the leg can be a little more challenging to define, right? Because it starts to get with the other flesh, right? So if you're kind of in the meat of the leg, the belly of the muscle, you'll probably find it easier to use the block, but try to get a little higher so that you're closer to the attachment, which is pretty high up, just as close as you could really get. And then circle your foot. So find your block is high up on the back of that right leg. Rotate the footing. Give direction to your foot. Circle it both directions. Yeah, kind of focus-wise, getting that foot to move. Just the foot, all by its lonesome self. Okay, now when you bend through that right knee, feel the block move higher up. So higher up right now actually is going to be lower on the back of the leg, just above the back of the knee. And then crease the knee so that the leg kind of folds into that block. So you're kind of holding onto the block. This is a good exercise on its own for training in strengthening right legs. They do these and sometimes yoga for hiking. There's some workshops that work with these where you hold the block behind the leg and you don't actually use your hands to hold the block. You just keep that block held by the leg muscles itself and move the leg a little side to side and try to really keep that block, don't lose it. So you're really strengthening the back of the leg, right, up into the glutes. Okay, so once you hold the block and pull it back in, you'll notice that, parts of your leg, right, are, using your arms to do the work. So This is a good one to try to get your knee closer to your shoulder and hold the block with the leg. It's doing all the work. A little challenging. Okay, now when you switch the sides, you'll bring your left leg in. Doesn't feel like the same energy is going on with that leg. I suppose you could probably try both blocks for that exercise. And then let the right leg go. Hamstring work, right? So bring the block as high up on the back of the leg as you can. Stretch the left leg up, switching the leg. And once you feel that you can circle the foot, rotate all the way through the foot. So feel the rotation from the heel, and then as the heel presses in and the toes turn out, circulate, make circles with the foot, both directions. Breathing. Okay, now sense when your left foot is relaxed, you're going to slide the block higher up, or actually lower. That's right. I'm going to get it together. Bend the knee. And then when you're pressing, you might start to drift the hands a little bit away. See if the leg can actually hold that block. And if it can, and you're pretty easeful with that, reach down through the right heel and get a feel of trying to move your knee towards you. It's not to move it away, it's to move it towards you. Right, picking up that stretch to the back of the leg. You can also go back to holding the block. It's not a competition how long you can hold the block behind your leg muscle, but it's a good exercise. And then lower that block, and we'll take a sandbag, and as we move our knees into the chest, whatever weight you have, small, or if you use a belt, that's fine. We'll place the knees to the chest and then get the feet straight up. Go right into it. So the flexing, the mixture of movement into the leg all the way through the heel and the foot. So now we've added all the parts, almost. So flexing, and then find that mixture of centering. So I have to find some blend between flexing my foot, which is going to happen with the sand no matter what. So I can just accept that it does the work without my brain giving that direction to my leg after a few moments. And then feel if your feet can go a little forward. Likely, when I feel like I'm centered and I think my legs are vertical, my proprioception says I need to be about here. Right? But if you check out the lineup of that, that's not right, right? That's not accurate. So it generally feels like it's a little forward. However, your bolster under your back could influence that. So you want to be pretty far forward on that bolster to support the arch of the spine. Okay, the arms need to get somewhere comfortable. So cactus arms. And then give yourself a good 1 to 2 minutes here for the session so we can really let the circulation drain out. And the diaphragm muscle working right against gravity. So strengthening the diaphragm, right? Because inverted poses, right, they're going to place the weight of the abdominal organs onto the diaphragm. So it's got to resist on the inhale right away. So the breath intake might be shorter than the out breath. And that's okay. That's what we're aiming for, to strengthen the diaphragm. So get a few more moments here. Fully rest the organs. Let the diaphragm continue to lift the abdominal organs on the inhale. And on the exhale, shedding, emptying the lungs. Yeah, you might recognize your feet trying to move a little bit farther back towards your chest. So keep them in that ascending verticality. And bend your knees. Work the position of the back stretching. So we're going to give a fuller stretch to that zone. So now remove your sand and take the belt so that it's around your upper ribs, and you're going to place it under your right foot. Okay. So feel that lift of the leg. Let's see. Try to decide if we should do this with the bolster under the pelvis or not. I think so. Okay, so we got a lot of height. Now, some of you have a couple blankets under your spine, so that might take away some of this extra sensation, but you might like to have that protection for your back. So if it feels too easy, then of course you can remove a blanket, but for now we have the one blanket policy right now for some of us under our head. So I'm going to put that belt pretty high up under the ribs. Now you can do this sequence for the leg without the bolster under your pelvis. So just keep in mind, that was my question, was if I should keep that bolster. There's a benefit to either, but we have it and we can invert more time. So I'd rather have us be up, more lift of the pelvis than not. So I want you to cross that right leg over to the left, but keep the belt pretty tight. Now, if it slides down like a lot, you're going to move it higher up towards as close up to your armpits as you could get that belt, which is not going to be right at your pits likely, but it's pretty high up. Now, when that leg crosses to the left, feel through that exterior hip on the right leg, okay? Now, open out the right arm, whether you have props all around you or not. Feel the circulation that moves from the right hip through the foot. Breathe, keep very clear on that. If anything, this class, the final spinal part of it's going to get a lot into the hips, so helping the back as well. Okay, now charge through it. So the next few moments, if it gets a little much, you can always back off and bring your foot up. That's okay. If you can stay with a few more breaths with the leg crossing to the left, keep it there. The left leg is pretty limp, right? It's not doing anything. It's basically an anchor. Okay, now try to keep the legs straight. So I push into my belt, whether it's perfect on me or not. I push and I keep that resistance going slowly as I move straight up with the foot. Right. Loofah your foot here. Clean up your foot by using that belt firm on your foot. And now with that leg intact and strong and stable, straight up, pushing. We're going to switch the foot and the belt. So bring your left foot up. See if you can go hands-free with it a little bit. Sometimes you might have to move your belt up higher, but work with the leg doing the movement, like as if you had to use your legs to do things, right? To get around here. So arm free, hands free on the belt as much as possible. And then start to move that left leg. Since we kind of know where we're going on this one, we'll go quicker on this side. Cross it to the right. And maybe the belt is closer to the ball, maybe it's closer to the heel. It will influence it a little bit. But as you cross over, let the right leg really go limp, needs to be heavy. Cross the thigh. And can the leg be straight? Yeah, if you need a micro bend, go for it. But if you can keep the leg lengthening all the way to the hip joint, take that on. Okay, the belt might slide down a little bit. It's probably going to be a mild influence unless it hurts your back. But we want to keep that hip on point. Hips probably can't point, huh? Okay, so get that crossover action through the muscle kind of dialogue in the leg. The muscle log. The leg is like a log. Okay, now this time straight leg. So push. I know it's like too many too many rules here. Push, if the belt's sliding off, hold it so it's a little higher up on the ribs. Push and lift straight up. Okay, and now we're gonna unbuckle. Good, good. And then take the belt away. So it's just kind of on under you if it's okay. Bring the knees in, and then if you can, I know some of us have blankets under spine, but we're eventually gonna get free of that. So you're gonna slide your bolster forward, knees to chest to help your back out that way. And feel the knees squeeze a little bit into the chest. And then as you get your bolster now away from under your rear, I want you to bring your right foot up to the left knee, so cross the right ankle to the left knee, and hold the back of the left leg and draw the legs in. You can hold behind the leg if it's easier for you to get just below the left knee and you don't have any kind of complications around your knees. That will probably be a more direct stretch into your right hip. But pull and sensitivity here through the hip. So feeling. Now lower the hands so they slide away from gripping the left foot on the bolster. Okay, now with that right knee moving open, see if you can maintain so this waistband is centering on the floor. Right knee is open. So I keep it in this figure 4 pose for a few moments. Keeping that version of focus. Okay, find a block or a ball, either one, doesn't matter. So that right knee is out. Okay, now what you're gonna do is put the blocks, it's gonna be on the inside of this right knee. So you're gonna shift the knee towards your shoulder, uncross, and then put the block. So it's actually between both of them, but sounded especially different, but not. So the block is between the two. And now when you push into your heels, I want you to drag the weight back into your hips and then scoop up the hips. So you're lifting up your hips into bridge pose. Blanket or not is up to you under your head. Keep the hips up, try to keep up, and like you have a dime between the buttocks when you're holding that dime. So you do feel this direct kind of focus into the rear when you have to get into this lift into the glute strength. Now, when you lower down from pelvic tilt, you let go of that dime right away, and then you center down all the way through the spine. Don't touch down all the way, so I take that back, but try to keep a tiny lift of your back from the floor. And hands are down besides your hips, so palms are down. And then push and lift up again, straight up towards the ceiling, assuming that's your direction. Good. Okay, keep that momentum of the hips. I know this is generally one where you're limited on your capacity, right? You have only so much quad length. Okay, but maximize that. Squeeze the object between the knees. Okay, now feel what it's like if you bring your arms overhead. So as they go back, you're lifting up your hips, and then you're going to lower your spine down. Okay, so ease the back. Scoop the tailbone under just a tiny bit. Breathe. Now move the block and place that left foot to the right knee, and then switching through. I'm going to hold the back of the right thigh or just below the right knee and squeeze. Draw the legs in towards your center. Seal off the spine so it's completely supported. If you removed your blanket for bridge pose, you might slide it back under your head and level out the hips. So we have the left hip as our focal hip. So if you have an assistant pet around, you can ask your pet to move your bolster to the right at this moment, if they're helpful at all, huh? Okay, now my ankle gets a tiny bit of motion here, right? It's a pretty decent support. So when I slide my hands off the leg and put the foot on the bolster, I still want to keep that left knee moving open. Okay, now if your hips kind of swing or you can feel your your tail wag, you can feel your right hip get higher than the left. Balance this out as if you're going to shift now the back of the pelvis center, and then uncross, but just like we're going to kick the bolster to the right side of our mat, and we're going to keep on that right hip. So sorry, left hip. So you're going to cross the left thigh over to the bolster. If you would like to use a ball and you have one, you're going to place at your sacrum, and you're going to add a sandbag to the exterior left thigh. So use a little weight. If you don't have one that's, pretty heavy, still use whatever you might have. So in the beginning, we put sand, I guess the first like 20 minutes, we use the sand on the side layer of the ribs, and now we're going on the side of the thigh. So try to use that pin and stretch position to elongate from the hip through the ribs, and then carry open that left arm, turn your head to the left. Let your eyes center, closing, softening. Fine tune at the final spinal of the practice to soothe the internal. Even when the external starts to shift in to your consciousness, whether it's plans or anything that might come up in the mind's control, see if you can return back to breathing. And this pose might be pretty calming for some of us, relaxing. Feel if that right leg below is straight or if it's a little bending, and try to stay with it bent. Right, so it's not a fixed form of the foot pushing down, but the leg is bending, so it's softening into your back muscles. So this goes over back to when we did the seated twists. It's the same darn thing, right? This is no different, it just looks different because we're on our back, so it has a different relaxation quality. But as if we had our arm hooked to the leg and turning, now we have a sandbag hooked to the leg. So feeling that left arm heavy is the twisting force of turning to the left. Okay, now come back with the brain center. And then as you move anything that's around the sacrum, and you consider how you're going to get to the second side. Now, think of when we do seated twists, right? We usually have something in between the two sides. So today we're going to do something real simple for the back, but important. So when you slide the sand away, you'll bring the left knee as high up towards the body as you can as it crosses to the right side. You'll clutch onto it, and then you'll roll onto your back. Well, you're already there. But then drop both knees into the chest, really compact. So you're in a cannonball shape. Hug the legs in. So there's as much focus of lengthening the low back of the pelvis as possible. Hydrate those hips. Okay. Now, when you switch the side, you're going to need your bolster on the left side. So this might be a good time to move the bolster with the addition of the knees to the chest. And then establish that left thigh root down. And if you're using that crossover angle using the ball, I want you to emphasize that you first get the leg on the bolster before you add the ball. So make sure you have your basic true formula before you start adding extra items to it. So the left leg, sorry, the right leg is crossing, the sand is on. And with that right arm opening out, remember the twist, the seated twist. What were you working with in your stomach muscles then? So the left knee bends, my head turns to the right, the armpit chest is reaching. And whatever energetically is gripping in the torso area or the back, you're clearly trying to soften. That might be the difference from the seated to the reclining, right? This is ideally a little more sedating and calming, but it's still good core work. And you might find you can do it for a longer period of time without the nervous system kicking in and kind of feeling some inflammation. So you're able to soften. So feeling where your head turns to the right, feel where your arms want to be. Maybe you have a hand on the right side of your abdomen or your thigh, or it's on the floor. Slowing that rotation down. Feel where you got your full stretch with that right thigh. And knowing that the deeper the pose goes is likely going to be efforting, right? So find where you're not efforting as much. So let's kind of produce less of that pressure in the nervous system. So we're in restorative completion here is where we're going. And if you have that ball to the sacrum, you want to move it away. And as you start to shift your sand, this time get the back of the legs to release. So we'll bring our knee in, we'll turn to our back, let the stretch of the back of the legs formulate. And you're going to want to do that by rolling up and putting your blocks under your bolster. So get the blocks so they're high enough before you lie back again for your complete restoration. I want you to have your blocks at the mid height and then your bolster and a blankie. So you'll add on a couple of goodies. I don't think that ball would do very well in there, but I guess you could put it in between in the blanket fold. Stretch the knees open. Think of this as knees open, not so much, I know it's the leg, but think of the knees out and then reach your torso forward so your elbows are on top. Now, if I push down into my arms, I feel a balance of strength in my back. So if you're pretty mobile and this is easy for you, instead of forcing a farther leg outward stance, I want you to have them pretty mild and then feel the balance in your sitting bones. Okay, let the breath come into your back so your back is open. And to start to create a cat spine, so your spine is round and your head tips down. Okay, and then push your hands gently. Well, I guess push and gentle don't go together, but move your hands forward and then slide your legs. You're going to lift them up on top of your bolster. Now that leg formation of moving them open, you're going to come forward onto the bolster so that your knees are wide apart. So this way the sand won't work very well on the shins. I want you to try to resist that temptation with shin sanding right now. So the heels float, but I'm really close to the bolster. And then when you lower back, you can put your sand across your ribs, or you could go sand free if you choose to have a little bit of weight progressing the circulation in your lengthening of your breath. Get that sand so it's right below the sternum. Oh, it kind of feels chestful, doesn't it, in that position? And then let the arms relax open. So completely centering the 2 points of contact with the breath, the inhale, filling the lungs, and the exhale, letting go. Simple riding of the breath. Feel both the feet and the hands equally relaxed. You can rest the fingers, rest the feet. And even if the body parts don't feel even in their relaxation effort on right and left side, you can evenly use your lungs usually, right? You can find an even tone in your breathing muscles. So give that a few more moments. Yeah, just let the legs relax. So the heels are gradually floating. You know, if the knees are guarded, if you feel a little grip in the knees just to hold your legs up there, take the final moments where you're relaxing your legs. So we could relax our heels to float, but still have grip in the thighs. So I noticed that was happening. So the knees might move a little bit apart so that you can actively, in some ways, work on that elevation to soothe, and also that support for the organs, right? There's the reverse of gravity's downward pull. So you can feel them rest. Now inhaling the next few levels of breath so the exhalation lengthens. Now, if your legs are pretty comfy with this path, we're going to slide the feet to the bolster and let the knees draw towards each other and let the knees draw apart. So the feet slide together and the knees open. Now you might find a shift in the inner hip. And then as you move your sand off your ribs, we'll start to guide our leg parts. So we draw the left leg in towards the left side of the ribs and the right leg. And as both of the legs are in, they're kind of motioning to that expansion of the rib cage. So they're a little wide. And then rock side to side. So you have a few moments of rocking. Roll to a side. Let your hands push you up to sitting. And then arrive so that you have a blankie under your tush and a seat to support your spine's lift, and bring your hands to balance in front of the heart space and surrender the brain there. Gather the collective focus, feeling support in your practice, breathing in slow, and exhaling, bowing into your heart. In gratitude, namaste. Thank you. Okay. All right, there's a few people.